All right. Welcome everybody to the Blue Collar Bodybuilding channel here. I got myself and Miss Tanya Miller with us today. What's up, Tanya?
What's up?
Not much on my end. I wanted to rope you in for a video here to talk a little bit about building some training programs for people from the perspective that I think a lot of people that are athletes can take away some lessons from what we're going to kind of show them some methodology on our end and thought process. But also specifically, my goal is to help the next up and coming coaches get through some of the growing pains, and hopefully we can teach them and show them like, this is how, out of the 100 plans we've put together, this is how we kind of structure things. And then there's a little bit of prefacing before you jump in to just start building a program. There's a little bit of investigation work you do with your clients, and you kind of develop a little background, and then you think you have it all perfect. You get people off and running, and then there's an adjustment period until you
Yeah.
can really kind of lock things in. I think that's going to be my main goal. And so we'll dive into that right after this intro.
This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only.
All right. And just a quick reminder, everybody that's watching out there, I just want to plug, if you tend to watch a lot of my videos, or you watch some of our lives, or you take anything in value away from our YouTube and you don't subscribe, please do me a favor. Just hit the subscribe button. It really helps out with the algorithm, and it really helps give us some motivation to continue to put out some of these videos and try to just bring bodybuilding up as a whole is our goal. Just want to put that out there first. So Tanya, we're going to do a little bit of a training building, like a 101, very basic, but like I mentioned earlier before the intro, a little discussion on when you have a new client coming to you, you can't just really evaluate everything that they have to say for gospel and then put that into a training program. There's a little bit of investigation work that we all put together as coaches, and that's evaluating people's physiques from that point all the way to looking at their experience level, also seeing what their goals are and setting those goals realistically and honestly, so that way we can actually feel comfortable setting ourselves on a path to achieve that goal, as well as just little nuanced things. And we're going to get into some slides after. But what do you think, if you had to say right off the top of the bat, is there anything that comes to mind that you see frequently with clients, or a new client that comes to you or a coach, you see some of their plans? Is there something that they tend to miss in evaluating, like developing a training program, that I'm missing?
Yeah, a lot of the times it's just total disregard and ignorance of total volume. They just think of each workout as its own individual universe, and they don't think of it as a broad plan. So I'll have a lot of males especially come to me with so much arm volume. Once I add it up, if they have a previous training program they were working on, I always ask if they have one already, and I kind of work off of that.
Sure.
And I'll go through all of the sets and everything, and normally the program they get back from me will have almost all, if not all, of the direct arm volume completely taken out, because it's, dude, you have 35, 40 sets a week in triceps and biceps when you count it all up from your pressing and pulling volume. We don't need all of this. We don't need the whole arm day. We don't need the 6 sets of biceps and triceps at the end of every upper body day. You're already hitting it so much and you're complaining about your biceps and your elbows hurting all the time. That's probably why.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's one thing, is just like thinking of it as individual workouts, and oh, I gotta have arms, so I gotta hammer my arms today, and then I gotta have legs, so I gotta hammer my legs today, I'm gonna hammer my back on this day, and they
Yeah.
just think about it as individual workouts instead of looking at the whole thing as, okay, this needs to be balanced. We can't just hammer everything at max intensity all the time. I'd say
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing, is just not thinking of it as a whole plan and thinking of it as just workouts and not adding up the volume and seeing if
Yeah.
that's actually appropriate.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I see that commonly too. That's something where, like you say, they're looking at each day of training, as you say, its own little universe, but they're kind of disregarding those parallel, using the same analogy, those parallel universes that are amongst us. And that's looking into different aspects. If we zoom out a little further on what you're saying, It's not just individual workouts, it's these pieces that build a training split. So all of that kind of encapsulates thoughts of recovery aspects, again, like evaluating goals and really looking at how that person built the physique that they have right now and how you can alter that and keep what's probably good, because there might be some great aspects that they've been working on that they hit perfectly, and then some that are just junk or useless or just done incorrectly, but it's all part of just this routine they do, and they forget about those things. And as a young coach, I was one that spammed a lot of volume myself when I used to develop people's training programs. And then I looked at things as if all we got to do is make it to the weekend so we can recover and then do it
Yep.
all again. But
Yeah.
that doesn't leave room for progression throughout a training block, or probably progression for even the whole phase. If we're looking at a whole off season phase or a whole prep, that's probably not setting us up for success either. I totally hear where you're coming from, and I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, that's a really common mistake with younger coaches and younger trainers, is thinking that the magic is in the program and thinking that every program has to be this wild combination of everything they can possibly think of to hit absolutely everything at every variation. And I've told several younger trainers who have come to me for advice and things, be like, you need to take all the focus off of working up this super complicated, special looking training program for every client. The magic isn't in the program.
Yeah,
The magic, you can give everybody the same basic template to start off with, and the real work is in the communication back and forth and tailoring it to the
sure.
person and giving them what they need and understanding the basic concepts and how to wrap those concepts around an individual person's context. It doesn't
Yeah,
need to be a super complicated. The programs actually need to be as simple as possible,
sure.
and then move
Yeah,
from there and just improve how they're executing the program. That's what the magic
yeah.
is in the service back and forth and improving that process, not the initial program that you give them.
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't, and to take that further, you don't need to have this specialized program that looks fancy right off the bat. Keeping it
Mhm.
simple allows us coaches to keep those cards like intense room to progress volume and
Yeah.
or room to take away volume, so we can get a little recovery aspects where the foundation of that training can uphold itself. So if I do
Yeah,
pull things
because
back, it's not useless training. It's still efficient. It's at least
yeah.
maintenance, if not better.
Yeah, because if you need to make a change and you've already programmed literally everything you can think of, what are you gonna change?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. It reminds me of cardio with people, building cardio up with them. I've had people in the past, if I don't identify to them what we're going to do for cardio in a prep, they'll take the treadmill, jack it right up, go as fast as they can. And then when they adapt to that 6 weeks down the road, and we're still 10 to 12 weeks out, it's, oh, geez, do you really want to do a weighted vest, or do you want to hit the
Mhm.
stairs? So these things need to be available for as we get closer to a show or closer to accomplishing that goal.
Yeah. Everything needs to be
Excellent.
least effective dose, just across the board. Everything needs to be just
Yeah.
enough, just what you need to keep progressing, and that's it, because you're gonna need to have more later of
Yeah.
everything.
Yep. Ronnie Coleman didn't step into the gym, even the greatest of the greatest, and do his day one was not an 800-pound squat, which we're all familiar with. He built up these variables to work for him and left room to grow. So that's great. That's a great preface right there. So let's just jump into it. We'll hit the first slide. And like I mentioned to you, I got about 5 steps set up that I think we need to look at before we even put together exercise selection and kind of determining all the fancy aspects of frequency and volume. I think there's some things that you need to look at as a coach when you're taking onboarding a new client. There's a few things that you just want to make sure that's clear amongst both of those parties. So that way we can definitely lock in for a common goal and not I'm on one plane, Tanya's on a different plane. We're heading in different trajectories or expectations. So I think step one comes right down to understanding that goal. So it could be simple things. And as you can see in this slide, it's really just going to kind of preface to us the whole idea of where we're starting from. So great idea would be, we're going to use one example. Let's just say that throughout this whole thing, Tanya, we'll use like a 30-year-old, let's do a 25-year-old male who's got about a year under their belt. And that's how they train, as if they have a year under their belt. We can
Yeah.
assume they know a little bit of the basics. They probably made some of those newbie gains, and maybe they're starting to really lock in some structure on nutrition. And we'll say that they've done a cycle or two in the past, and we're going to anticipate at least like a typical testosterone base with maybe some growth hormone. And let's just leave it at that as our example as we kind of go along. And this person's looking to improve in an off-season sense. So I just want to preface that so we have an example to go along with here. So in that thought process, my discussion with them would be hitting some of these subtopics that I wanted to cover, which are, where are we with this individual? Are we trying to grow, which is what we identified with them? Are they also other things to think of? Are they coming off of injury, or are they coming off of a long time off of training? Maybe this guy took 6 months off, or just kind of lost the love from it from his first show he might have competed for, and now they're getting back into the groove. We're just going to assume that this person's never had a coach. They've been trying to grow, couldn't be successful, and that's where we're hitting on. But it's still worth mentioning that these other aspects are things that need to be clarified as your very beginning step. Just saying to them, if it was you, Tanya, I'd be asking you, so what brought you to me? What goals are we looking to accomplish? And where are we starting at? Give me some background and thought process. How do you approach that when you initially meet with somebody and we're in the beginning stages of getting a program put together?
Yeah, very similar. Like all of this stuff, and a lot of that is collected in the initial inquiry form that they submit. I ask for some basic information there just so I have an idea. And then I follow up with them. I book a time to have a video call, and then we have a 20-30 minute call kind of talking about everything in depth. And then from there, I can kind of figure out what tier of coaching would be best for them, what kind of package they should be on, things like that. And we kind of get going with the strategy from there. But it's very similar. I ask all these basic questions, what their goals are, all of that, so that we know what direction we're heading in for sure. Very similar. And
Yeah,
they're
definitely.
almost always training around an injury. When I get somebody who comes to me and doesn't have an issue that they have to work around, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Really, no
Yeah.
matter what the age. No matter what the age.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always something lingering, right? Because even without guidance, most people forget how to recuperate, be patient, recover an
Yeah.
injury, and then get back to full speed.
And they always think that they're the only one. They're like, oh, it's going to be hard with me because my lower back. And I'm like, yeah, you and everybody else.
Yeah. Me, myself, and I included.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then I think, yeah, so that's a great point. Evaluating background too with people. So let's say step one is understanding the goals. So this individual we're going to use as an example is looking to compete, but we need to grow some muscle, and they're just coming off of just their own training. Let's just call it maintenance. So for the hell of it, we're going to say let's just make it fun. We're going to say that they have a little tendency to have lower back flare ups where that gets a little iffy, because that'll be relevant to discuss down the road when we put a training program together. And then, yeah, also trying to understand their background too. I didn't include it in here, but just understanding experience level is something
Yeah.
that we always kind of want to discuss, because it makes a big difference if somebody said they put 5 years into it and it looks like their training is just still very amateur, or maybe it could be the opposite. You see somebody that's very athletic, or maybe comes from a background where there wasn't a lot of lifting, but they understand coaching. They had been in some sort of sport like football or wrestling where coach athlete relationship, they're coachable people. So I think knowing that about them and just making some fair assumptions with people can get you off on the right step to identify, all right, how intense can I push this person? And are they one of those that think they know everything or don't?
Yeah.
Because that's, just to be fair, true. Like, there's some people that think, oh, you don't got to worry, my training's pretty dead on. And I go, you're going to prove it to me and show me. So,
Exactly. Yeah, I have some of those questions in my intake form as well. Have you been coached before? What were your experiences? What were your likes and dislikes? I ask them about, of course, their training experience, and I ask them what their likes and dislikes are there as well, because I like to know
mm,
that for programming things, because I like them to like it as much as they possibly can.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then after our call, when they decide they do want to sign on for coaching, I have an additional intake form that asks more in-depth stuff to kind of help me move forward with their starting program that they fill out.
yeah, yep, yep. All good things. You can't collect as a young coach too much data.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
stuff you're going to learn what's valuable to you to collect, and some might
And
not be as important.
it's also a great filter because if you think that this information is a lot, wait till you get to the spreadsheet we're going to be working with.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's get into step two here. So I'm trying to find a nice way for us to blend in our faces at the same time. I'm going to put you, I don't know if I can even move you around, but anyhow, let's try this one. There we go.
That's better.
Much
That's
better.
not covering the text.
and then drop that. So step 2, assessing someone's real life schedule. So this is pretty straightforward and obvious, right? Trying to identify with this new person, this 25-year-old, what is their work like? Because that matters for sure when you're developing someone's physical, actual training program, their split, how you want to approach frequency as like a big picture thing, like over a training block. What kind of responsibilities do they have? You're not being prying into people's life to try to understand what are their priorities, because you need to be able to be a coach that can work around that. I'm never going to tell somebody you can't pick your kids up because that's training time, or you
Mhm.
can't, grandma isn't as important because we got leg dated. You need to understand as a coach that people have lives, and there's things that you need to sometimes steer them towards. This is more important than actually your training and just being human as well. But as you can see in these subtopics, we're going to try to figure out with that person, with their life, how many days a week can we actually train? Because that's going to be something we have to figure out in that questions. And how much time within a given day do they have? Is this, I'm limited to an hour post work, post after work to 5 o'clock in the busy window, try to squeeze in a session? Or is this someone that has a little more time and they can get middle of the day training or a nice evening session or even morning where they still squeeze in a meal? So for our example, what do you think would be fun? You want to do like evening training? And imagine that's probably most people.
Yeah, yeah, like that after work type of situation.
Yeah. So we'll plan on that. And then, yeah, and then consistencies in the aspect of your work schedule, right? I just picked up a client the other day that works for the prison as a, would you say, corrections officer. So they're doing 4 days on straight and then 4 days off. So
Yeah, I've
those are all
had
great.
more than one client that are truckers.
Yeah. Yeah. Same, actually, same. Absolutely.
Mm.
I have one program where this person trains at a truck stop with bands for
Yep,
their cardio, their high intensity.
I have one who has some weights and stuff in the back of his truck.
That's so funny. That's so
Hmm.
funny. Yeah. Yeah. So if you think you can't make it happen, people, I've got some
Yeah,
fun. I got some
I
stories for
programmed
you.
it out. He's got 3 days a week, and 2 of those days are 100% doable in his truck.
Absolutely. Yep. Make do. So those are all great things. So you're getting exactly what I mean, Tanya. You're trying to find out, how can I not interrupt this person's life too much, but
Yeah.
also ask for realistic time to be set aside. There's a balance
Yeah.
there for
Yeah,
sure, right?
I have a couple of questions that kind of get at that in my intake form. One of them is I ask them, what is the maximum amount of time that you have available to train per week consistently? And I put in parenthesis, maximum, not ideal, preferred amount of time. It's going to be
Yeah.
less than whatever you tell me.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then I think my last question on there is give me an outline from wake up to bed of what a normal day looks like for you.
Sure.
Because first of
Sure.
all, I want there to be an intelligent answer there because I hope their life is consistent enough to be able to repeat it. And then second of all, it gives me more information about what their day looks like and how things need to fit in.
Yep. Yep. I think another fair one to hit on with people too is just looking at the thought of travel. Not everybody is the roofer, not everybody's a landscaper. Some people have got different jobs where they're going to be in San Francisco next weekend for four
Yeah,
days. They're going to be home for 3 days and then off to New York. And they just got this schedule that's a lot of
yeah.
traveling. So
I have
that's
several
something you need
clients
to.
who travel like that for work, like at least once a month. Yeah.
Yeah, same. I got one guy that's actually Amy's boss there. He's a cosmetic surgeon, and that's something that he does too. He's traveling like every other week. Or I'd say maybe every third week we're traveling. So
Mhm.
that's a discussion where, just to quickly hit on, that's something where you're going to have to expect to help them work through those travel schedules. So,
Mhm.
like me, we have it down so well with our white collar kind of people that are doing a lot of traveling for their job. It might just be a corporate job and it makes total sense. They got to do a lot of travel. And I'll have discussions with them being like, all right, what is the living situation like on this travel? Are we in a hotel where all you had is a microwave, maybe a
Mhm.
hot
Mhm.
plate? Or are you at an Airbnb with a full kitchen? Or is none of this available? Are we
Yeah.
just running from hotel to hotel where we can't set up scenarios here? And so a lot of those background things, without breaking into that topic, it's all part of understanding background and understanding time, because we talked about consistency of time. So right here,
And
I think it's really relevant.
I think that's somewhere where like bodybuilders especially make such good coaches for people, even if they're not the clients aren't bodybuilders, is because who knows better how to travel and still stick to their plan 100% than bodybuilders?
Yeah.
So we know all the hacks, we know all the things and all the techniques that we use. And a lot of coaching people like this just becomes like a mentorship in how to, deal with your
Carry.
protocol and stick to your protocol on the fly and how to travel wisely, how to look up information beforehand, how to know what the situation is going to be like. Like I end up giving these clients a crash course in that. And it's if I didn't have the experience of having to do that to be a bodybuilder, I wouldn't be able to give them so many valuable tips and ways to do
Yeah.
that. Right?
Yeah. Like one big thing with me is, all right, we're going to be on diet. The easiest thing I can do is keep you on diet. It might be actually
Mhm.
hard to find a gym and finding Uber there, or you don't have
Mhm.
a gym at the hotel, or you're at an Airbnb out of nowhere land, and we're not going to be able to train. We're going to have to figure out some form of activity to
Yeah.
be acceptable. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that all falls under this third subtopic. Are training days consistent or do they change? So it's a relevant topic to make sure that we're hitting on with people.
Yeah.
So let's get into the next thing. And I think this is probably the most important one, Tanya. You can tell me what you think, but we can only, let me step back here. We can only build a program that we can recover from, is the best way, right? We don't dictate volume and then plug in recovery. We actually try to get an understanding of how much recovery we're going to have available to us. It's not just squeezing in your training, because
Yeah. The
if
recovery is
Tanya,
the priority, not the volume.
exactly, yes. So you actually just said it perfectly. If we're going to decide how much work we can get done, figuring out that recovery capabilities is actually where we start. So how do you approach that with people? Is this kind of something you try to build a nighttime routine with them, or is it like another topic would be a thought process would be like 2 days on, 1 day off discussion with them, or 5 days on, 2 days
Mhm.
off on weekends, which I'm a big fan of. How does that topic come about and you investigate with people when they sign on with you?
If they'll let me, I'm gonna build a whole day routine for them that's gonna
Mm,
optimize their recovery. So that's really just digging into the habits and that 24-hour, what your habits are like, what your day structure is like. We're gonna do a lot of work on improving that where there's holes to be filled for sure, and there's always holes to be filled. So the first thing is almost always gonna be sleep. So it's almost always modulate how many stimulants are taken in, what their day-to-day routine is, what their sleep wake times are like, if those are all thrown off. It's a lot of habits usually that get cleaned up, so I really just worry about the habits first because I feel like once we get through that first initial weeks of cleaning up those habits and getting them more locked in the way that I would like to see them, then we really get to see what the true recoverability is of that person,
sure.
right? I don't even really worry about it all too much until we can get it settled and congealed into a consistent pattern of habits so that we can actually see, okay, now that you're acting right, and your life is a little bit more regulated and we have some better habits in place, how are we recovering now?
Yeah.
And then kind of move from there, right?
Yeah.
Because a
Great
lot of
point.
times there's so much low hanging fruit to clean up in their lifestyle that you
Sure.
can get a lot of extra recoverability in your tank just by cleaning that stuff up. And that's why those first 3 months, for example, with my coaching, I just transitioned over to a structure where the first 3 months are a little bit of a higher rate, and then they kind of go down to a retainer rate after that because the first 3 months there is double the work because we're cleaning up all these initial habits and we're really locking into the process. There's a lot
Yeah.
of work and a lot of background work that goes into that. So those first 3 months are super, super important for getting that low hanging fruit covered so that we can actually see, okay, now that we're living correctly and following the protocol and recovering better, what's our recovery like? And then what
Yeah.
can we do from there to really fine tune the volume and the frequency and everything. But I like to have rest days distributed if possible with people. If they have a 5 day program, like of course the days per week will go by what their experience level is and what their goals are. If it's a general population person who's new, it's going to be like 2 or 3 days a week, right? But if it's somebody like this 25-year-old example we're using, it'll probably be like 4 or 5 days a week, depending on his schedule. And I like to have a midweek rest day and then one at the end of the week if possible, if they can do that with their schedule.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. No, those are all great points. And what you reminded me of too is when we look at habits, that's what those first few months is, building some patience with each other to understand we have habits and routine we're trying to set in place that become, again, my boring answer of foundational pieces. A routine is almost mandatory, or
Yeah.
a good understanding of what needs to get accomplished in the sense of a checklist is mandatory.
Mhm.
But then there's other stuff, right? We have to look into when we're looking at recovery. Is this, we talked about the injury history with somebody, but also what demands of cardio they need, I think is relevant too, because that's just a time number. That's a number we have to plug into the day or
Yeah.
throughout the week, right? Even in an off season, I'm going to have minimum 3 by 15. And that would be like hit cardio for somebody,
Yeah.
or 4 by 20, low intensity, steady state approach with people.
And
But
a
so
lot of
that,
times the way I'll work that in is do half and half before, after the workout, something like that.
yeah, yep,
Especially if somebody's busy and can't do it in a separate session, just use it as your warm up and cool down.
yeah, absolutely. A good one is just for the people that tell you too, like when it comes to habit building, I can't eat in the morning. We're going to work on that. We're going to work on step one of recovering is starting to get some food in you as early as we can.
Yeah,
Um,
and the way I approach that is I tell them, all right, we're going to have minimum 4 meals a day. I like 5, but minimum 4. Set the times that you can realistically have those meals. One of them has to be in the morning before you train. There's no fasted training. Something at those times every single day. If you can't get the whole meal down, it doesn't matter. Get something in at those
sure.
times every day with time. Because most people think that the appetite is just static, and it is what it is. The appetite is is an effect of the habits that you have. So you teach
Yeah,
your body when to be hungry, and most adults barely eat all day and then they eat a big meal at the end of the night. So they've trained their body to only be hungry at the end of the night and not have an appetite in the morning. So
sure.
if you train it to something else, it will adjust to something else.
Yeah,
So with time of having those evenly spaced meals at the same time every day, your appetite will work up to expect that. And then after a while, all of a sudden, what do you know? They can get their whole meals in at those times.
yeah. Great point. And that's exactly how you go about it, right? Is building, they will get hungry for breakfast once they've tempered their body to get used to that. And it takes some patience, it takes some time, and it might take not the initial meal you want to put in for breakfast, but like you say,
Yeah.
starting them off with something, a
Yeah,
shake,
even if
some,
it's just a shake. If it was just a
yeah,
shake, that's something. Yeah.
yeah, some shake, a little granola or something like that, where you get a little bit of fat, protein,
Mhm.
carb, and we're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
Here's the other big lever that needs to be discussed because this definitely comes into the recovery play. Is this person natural, or is this person that we're onboarding enhanced? And what kind of experience are we talking when we talk enhanced versus natural? So this example, we're using someone on test in growth hormone mainly. We'll say 500 test and 4 units of GH for a 25-year-old male trying to grow. But all those things have to be considered because those are tools. And this is where people get the drug part wrong. Those are really tools first for recovery than they are for performance.
Yes.
And
It just allows you to recover faster. That's it.
and that's the primary goal of the gear is the
Yeah.
recovery. The secondary thing that we get as a benefit, an added benefit, sometimes is improved strength and improved performance or better nutrient shuttling, depending on the compounds
Which, I
they use.
mean, nutrient shuttle, I kind of consider that recovery, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, the better we can do that, the better off we're putting all these recovery things into play. And if you don't have the ability to recover, we can't even add more volume, or we can't
Right.
increase frequency, or we might not make it to the end of the progressive training block. So I think these things here, when you young coaches put together some plans, this is probably one of the bigger things too. You have to just understand it has to be a starting point and it might evolve over time. Recovery might actually become less from person to person as they become more advanced. The first people, I usually they're sore in the first month of training, and then they start the body adapts a little bit, and then we can decide how we're going to push intensity a little bit further. But they usually catch some ground in consistency on recovery. I'll start to find out like, all right, I got Tanya on 2 leg days. I know that by the third day she recovers and she's ready for another leg day. So we can rest again and then hit it on the fourth day or something like that. And those are all valuable tools to building a split. It has to be known. You don't want to find out the wrong way and you just hurt somebody, or you really just kind of run in place. Because if we don't
Yeah.
recover, we don't grow. We grow from recovery. We don't grow
And
from the
this
trip.
is And this is another place where you can't just kind of take somebody's word for it because, and I can speak for myself because I've definitely been there. I spent years there. A lot of people don't really actually know what it means to be recovered from their training. Just because you can continue doing your training split doesn't mean you're recovering from it.
Yeah.
You could
Yep.
just be driving yourself into the ground every single week. If you're still frustrated with your results and you feel like you're training as much as you possibly can, you probably aren't recovering well.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And you got to think that it's a moving thing, right? Within a training block, recovery might be good on week 1 and 2, but then as you start adding in more sets, more working sets, or maybe you start adding, it might be just saying to somebody towards the end of the training block, we start adding in a couple little small movements just to build up the volume.
Or even
Um,
just time, just more weeks training.
yeah, just more time. Yeah. I like to teach people. I still use deloads with everybody, but they're different from person to person. I got some people that are on a schedule and it just works perfect because anytime we mess with the schedule, it doesn't work. We've come to find out one of my best clients, Rodney, that's been with me forever. We do five, we do a 6 week plan, but 5 weeks of hard training that progresses from week 1 to 5. And then we have a recovery week, a deload week, and it works like a charm. If I do it too early, he gets bored and he pushes that recovery week into a training week. And if we go any further, he trains so hard he puts himself into a hole. And then we got to get fancy with the following week's deload. All this is great points to really understand. So I think that hits a little bit on the recovery aspect. Now, step 4, as we get to 4 and 5, for bodybuilding specifically, this is huge, Tanya, looking and identifying weak points and priorities. So that way we can kind of set up how we want to train someone. So this example we're using, we're just going to say the kid's upper body, some young kids' upper bodies are always ahead of their legs. So we're going to use our example as somebody that needs to improve their quads. This would be something like getting some physique photos ahead of time from people and then pairing that up with what was their previous training like? Were they avoiding leg or were they doing it incorrectly or were they overdoing it? Right. Because that's still a possibility. How do you really approach evaluating the weak points and priorities? Are you doing photos? Are you talking to them also on strength aspects? How do you like getting into that?
Definitely photos for sure, especially if it's a physique athlete. And I would ask for stage photos if they had previous stage photos. I'd ask for judge feedback, etc. So the stage photos would be first, just kind of see what visually the lagging parts are, what the strong parts are, of course. And then from there, I'm honestly more concerned about their training quality. I would want to see their training if they had any videos. That would be awesome. I've never had somebody come to me with videos already. But my first thing is I wouldn't even necessarily program them a bunch of dominant volume on their quads yet until I saw
Mhm.
how they train. So I might give them a pretty balanced program first and then see how they train, because if they're training their legs like shit, maybe
Yeah.
it's not a volume thing, and maybe once we get their technique cleaned up and get them training correctly, their legs will take off. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to start them off with too much volume first and then have to pull it back if all that is needed is just a technique change.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. I could use myself as a perfect example. In my younger years, I grew a big butt and great hamstrings, and my quads lacked
Oh yeah.
and you've probably seen this 1,000 times, because of the way I trained my quads, I wasn't allowing my quads to incorporate themselves into the work as much as
Yeah.
my glute was taken over.
Yeah.
And that's everything. That's like my squat was just glute dominant. And I just didn't know at the time until it was pointed out, until I was
Yeah.
obviously saying my legs aren't growing, but my hamstrings are killer and my glutes are huge. What's going on here? So
Yeah, let me
that's a
tell you
great
something.
aspect you're talking about.
My legs used to be my weak point, my whole lower body. I didn't have really much lower body muscle at all, and I used to do so much leg volume. 20, 30 sets a week easily, so much leg volume. And all the leg growth I've gotten over the last few years has been mostly single digit sets total and leg muscle groups a week because
Mhm.
my training is just so much better. So it was
Yeah.
not a volume thing for me either, clearly, and my legs were my weak point.
Mhm. Would it be fair to say you were probably over? Because I know your intensity was probably high, probably still a
I
little
don't
bit too
think
much
that.
volume?
Yeah, it was just a lot of just not ideal training for lower body. I was
Yeah,
a barbell snob for a long time because it used to be in the time when you're a pussy if you use machines and
sure.
free weights are better. And I trained from home a lot, so I didn't have a lot of machines. So it was just squatting, lunging, stiff-legged deadlifts. That was pretty much it, and I didn't get shit from that. And it was just
Yeah,
lots and lots of volume. I wouldn't necessarily say I was training anywhere as hard as I do now because I just think I think it takes damn near a decade to actually develop the skill of training as hard as we do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
I
fair.
really do.
Even people that are talented off the bat, they're going to take some
Yeah.
time to achieve perfection.
And the
Sure.
closer that people get to that, oftentimes the lower their training volume gets
Yeah.
because they're so much better in the individual repetitions. They can put so much more into it. They don't need as much training volume.
Yeah. I can second that for myself as an example.
Same.
Yeah. And I think that allowed me to actually open up more doors to what I could do, like in
Yeah.
my training when it comes to intensifiers or learning how to say to myself, Dave, the best way to use this leg press isn't really volume for you. It's really getting it after it on an approach of high intensity, 6
Mhm.
to 8 reps, push it hard and only get yourself 2, maybe never over 3 working sets on that
Yeah.
and calling it a day.
Yeah.
So
And I can
really,
see in somebody's training when they've reached that point in their training maturity or not. And when I
Mhm.
can see that they have and they know how to put the horsepower into the reps, I get really excited because I'm like, oh, we can really fine tune stuff now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that what was it I remember here? Yeah, this other aspect of identifying weak points and priorities is understanding too as a bodybuilder. And this, I think this is pretty important. What disappears first when you diet down, right? I think it's different from everybody. And I think there's a lot of things that come in. There's a lot of variables that decide why you're losing size. It might not just be the diet. It might not be, it might be something like cardio selection. It might be, again, frequency or volume overall in that training, or maybe transitioning, which is rare with me, but I might transition somebody from, if we're talking quads, I might transition a figure girl or a bikini girl from the higher volume with a little bit of high intensity to straight volume in their prep, just so that way we can make sure volume's much more replicable than intensity day in and day out sometimes. To a point, depending on the person, but there's scenarios where that comes into play. But that might be the wrong move if your quads disappear, right? Why change it if you don't have to? So
Yeah.
everyone's going to have that feedback, obviously, Tanya. If you have the availability to see this person you're talking about, you talk about seeing stage photos. What looks different from stage photos to 8 weeks out, and what looks different from off season to 8 weeks out or stage photos? There, you might be able to say, "Wow, you really lose your quads, or you really lose your arms; they just disappear."
It's usually the areas with just less muscle maturity.
Yeah, that too. Yep. And then the last one, quick one I'll hit on here is what body parts may only need maintenance. And I think that's important to understand too, because if you have a very dominant body part, I'm not going to ever tell you to stop training them. But a good example you gave me right off the bat was arms, right? Was people spamming too much volume in arms. This would be, if you can identify, that would be a great way to say, let's put those arms to a maintenance volume and use that volume distributed other places, right?
Yeah, because this is going back to what we were talking about in the very beginning, is the recovery is all coming from the same bucket. So you
Yeah.
can't think about it as individual workouts. You have to think about the whole week, and you have to make sure that you have enough budget for the recovery that you need. Because if you're going to do something like a quad specialization phase, that's cool. But you can't then also do full volume on everything else. You literally can't afford it.
Yeah.
So even those arm sets, like that's taking away recovery that is now being compromised between all the different muscle groups and not just the one you're trying to push it mostly towards. So that's what
Yeah.
the reason why, like, wellness girls need upper body muscle too, right? But there's a reason why so many of them do 4 leg days a week and maybe 1 upper body day, is because they would not be able to recover from those leg days if they
Mm.
also had 3 full upper body days.
Yeah.
You have to
Absolutely.
give and take. If you're going to bias something, if you're going to do a specialization phase, that needs to be the highest volume, and you need to find ways to pull volume from the other spots that just can be maintained as much as you can to make
Yeah.
room for the volume for that specialization body part.
Yep. Yep. It comes from it's like you say, a budget. You only have so much you can spend in that week. You just got to use it wisely.
Yeah, I
Uh,
have 30 sets of back a week. There's no way I could also have 30 sets of legs a week.
yeah. Very good. Yeah. So that makes sense. These are all things that have to be considered when you're a coach and you're putting together someone's plan. And it's just going to yield you better results in the long run the more you do your homework ahead of time. And
Yeah.
this might not be easy right off the bat, following these 5 steps that we're kind of laying out, but you're
That's
going to
what
get better
coaches are
at it.
for.
But you're going to learn this. And even as a young coach, where this is like you're saying, this is a lot more than I kind of put into things with people. If you want to be good, you really want to set up an initial takeoff with people of
And I hope it's showing that,
accomplishment.
like, I hope it's showing how much of the process is not even, we haven't even gotten to the training program yet, right?
Yeah.
It's just all of this context and information. That's really where the service is. It's not the fucking training. If you just want a training program for me, book a
Yeah.
consult. I'll give you a training program. I've done that for people.
Same.
If you want the actual service and you're paying monthly for a service, it's not, the initial training program is nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the monitoring over time. So that's week by week and feedback. And how did this work for you, Tanya? How did this work for this?
I barely ever look at my clients' programs. Once I made it and built it out and it's running, unless there's a problem, what do I need to look at it for?
Yeah.
It's everything else that I'm looking at.
Yeah. I'll keep an eye on making sure periodically, I'm
Yeah.
still looking every week to see if we did progress. And if we're progressing too quickly, I might want to audit your form and just say,
And
"All
another
right,
thing
you're a
I'll look
little
at,
thick
especially with new clients, especially general population people, is in their first month or so, I'll monitor it to see if everything looks like 3 by 10 by 20, 3 by 10 by 20, 3 by 10 by 20. Because if it's exactly the same reps across all your sets all the time, there's a training intensity issue here, and we need to look at these videos.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. No, that's an excellent point. And that goes overlooked frequently. What do you see most programs? What are they programmed at for volume per exercise? 3 by 10.
Which I might give you I'll never give an exact number. I might give you a 3 sets of 8 by 12 on almost everything, especially if it's a newer person, just to be very basic and get them started on something. But it's a range, and I want to see that number changing from set to set, because that tells me you're actually pushing yourself. If I told you to go as hard as you can, and you have 10, 10, 10, you didn't go as hard as you can somewhere.
Yep, absolutely. And it's okay to have things step back. If I saw your top set for let's just say a bench press was 150 pounds, okay, and I want you to get 3 working sets out of it. If I see 150 pounds, we got 12 reps, and then I see we got 11, and then we drop down to 9, that's actually telling me that we're probably applying the training well, because that's to be expected if we're not moving weight around. We're not dropping weight down. Something's going to give. And you can't always just provide enough recovery time between sets to just hit that number again. I might not hit 12 again that day. It just might be the first working set was my strongest set, and that was it. So you make a great point of if you're hitting 10, 10, 10, 10, you're missing reps somewhere. And once you understand that and they can comprehend that and they can get their ego set aside, they'll understand what you mean by it.
Yeah.
Becomes a very powerful tool. So let's hit up step number 5 before we kind of do a little example with people. But once we've got the goal established and we're on the same page with that, you've done your job as a coach to understand scheduling and this person's background of life and priorities and age and what's going on, school, work, family, and their motivation and their why. Those are all important. And then you're looking at recovery, and we've evaluated weak points. This is where we can probably plan out the week. We can probably look at not just an individual day of training, but how do we want to use that info to set up the split for the week? And so again, for this example, with a 25-year-old that's using testosterone growth hormone, that needs their 175 pounds and they want to put on some muscle mass, we're going to identify quads as their weak spot. So I'll actually let you take over on thought process on this one, but are you a big fan of annihilating things once every 7 days, or are you using recovery to say I can do every 9 days, or are you trying to look at a 7-day split and keep it consistent? How do you like bringing things up when we talk frequency of someone that's lagging in the quad department?
I definitely don't like once a week for most people. I like to split it up as much as I can, because I do believe more frequency means higher quality training in those individual sessions. So I do like to split it up as much as I can with their recovery. And for most people, that just defaults to twice a week for most things. If we're doing a specialization, if we're really leaning into the legs, say this guy's training quality is actually good, so it's okay, we can actually lean more of the volume into the legs, maybe it does need more volume, then I might maybe try to go for 3 days a week. And then maybe something else that's on maintenance can just be once a week. If they have a great back or a great chest, shoulders, whatever, that can be
Yeah,
just a once a week. And maybe a set here or there on one of their other days. Because I'm also not opposed to, I actually love putting something else completely unrelated for a couple of sets on their leg day so that we can distribute volume even more to have
yeah,
more high quality sets. And then that way they're not going into, because I kind of like that both of my leg days are not 100% leg days. One of my leg days is also abs, and one of my other leg days is also shoulders. So it's like the whole thing
sure.
doesn't have to be legs. That mentally works for me a whole lot, and it works for a lot of people also as well. So I do like to split it up for sure. I don't like once a week to get all of the volume in if we're trying to grow something. If it's just maintenance, we can put something on once a week, but stuff we're actively trying to grow, I want to have at least twice a week so
Mhm.
that the volume can be split up, because I think that 4 sets on this day and then 4 sets on this day is going to be better in the long run than all 8 sets on this day every time.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think that came down to you having a good understanding of the goal and the priority needs of figure for yourself, right?
Yeah,
You're
yeah, yeah.
understanding if I can put some extra room than the typical what like maybe a bikini girl or wellness girl would do because you need those cap delts and you need some size to them, not just shape and tightness to them. I can understand why you're doing some legs and a little bit of deltoids. Where someone, maybe our example, they need a little bit, they need the quad growth, but we have some room to squeeze in the rear delts because now we have that back that's a big priority, not a big priority, that's their strong point. We might have just made no room for rear delts because we're putting a full back day and we're
Yeah, that's
find a
another thing
spot to
too,
do.
is like whatever's on maintenance, you could get away with a lot less exercise selection. You could just do,
Yeah.
say it's for back, you could just do a good couple vertical things, a good couple of rows. You don't need to do isolations, you don't need to do one arm at a time, you don't need to do rear delt stuff because it's already a strong point, it's already all getting hit. If you have a couple of good back movements, it's going to hit everything. And then you can
Yeah.
really go into the detail and have more isolation movements and more variety on the legs that you're specializing.
Yeah, definitely. And then the last thing I'll mention here that I think is pretty important is, does the current diet phase support that recovery or that frequency? So understanding where someone's at with their dieting capabilities and how their body, how you're anticipating their body to react, you might need to start lower and then you can actually add volume down the road. So what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, Tanya, we got this new kid is new to dieting though. He's been one of those that just, I eat a lot, whatever that means. I eat clean, whatever that means. And then they go ahead and this is the first time they're on a structured plan where they know what
Yeah.
breakfast is going to be tomorrow and they know what it's going to be on Monday and so on. Building up their ability to recover first before we understand frequency is the same thought of making sure that we can understand what they can handle for diet and hopefully what their experience level is with diet. So that way we can understand frequency as well, because diet's part of recovery. So that's just an understanding. If they're a newbie, I might start them just a little bit easy as I'd like to, before I put them into a higher volume, or I might be limited to how much volume because they're just new to dieting. We're working on getting to 4 meals here, right? So I
Yeah.
got to think about that aspect before I plug in any more volume. Once they can get to 4 meals, 5 meals, and they're starting to feel good, hunger's ticking up, and food's moving in a direction where I'm not getting them fat or I'm not getting them sluggish either, or creating digestive issues and moving too quickly in the diet, then I can start secondarily putting that into my training bucket and understanding, okay, another tool I can use. We got diet and nutrition running. So I do think when we look at that, again, this at the bottom here, does the current diet phase support more frequency? I think that needs to be definitely thought about and have an understanding of where that client is, just as a teaching point. So
And
this,
sometimes more frequency can be better for recovery if we're just keeping the volume exactly the same, but we're splitting it up. Say we had 3 days a week or whatever before, and it was kind of hard for them to recover because of the length of the workouts. Okay, we'll split this up into 4 days, make one of them a half and half, and split that up into a different day. Same
Mhm.
exact amount of volume, all of a sudden it's better quality volume, and they can recover from it better because now it's like a 30-45 minute session.
Yeah. Yeah, and understanding, like, one thing we talked about with the recovery part too, I think that was in step 3, but nonetheless, it was how do people react to recovery blocks too? Does this person do well with an intense 45-minute session where if we're gonna need to probably plug in 5 a week and that gets them to recover better? Or can we do an hour and 15-minute session where we can probably put a little more workload on them, but that means because of their dieting capabilities and work life, they can only do 4 days of training, and the rest has to be dedicated to some recovery and rest and sleep and let them do their job and get the kids to soccer on the weekends and all that stuff. I think that's all really relevant points. So that's our preface right there. Am I missing anything before we jump into anything that pops off the top of your head? I think that we were pretty thorough, but
Maybe just rolling splits versus static ones. Most people are going to prefer a static one just because they have a static week elsewhere in their life, so it helps for every week to be the same. Sometimes they don't care and it's more practical for them to have a rolling one, and I've had to be like the come to Jesus person with several clients. The Gregorian calendar doesn't matter. Like, if a 1 week split takes you 9 days to accomplish, it doesn't matter. Just keep going with it. Like, we can just, like, I've had people, all right, it's just going to be every other day training because you can't break away from this. Oh, it's 5 days a week. I have to get them all in the week. Every other day training now. So it's going to be different. It's just going to roll however you need to do it. Or people who travel unexpectedly a lot. It's like whenever you can get your next session in, just get it in and keep it rolling. And a lot of times I'll have to tell clients not to refresh the week and go back to where the day is supposed to be. Like, if they did 1 and 2 and missed 3, they'll skip back up to 1, and it's no, do 3 and then go to 1 and 2. Just do it like that. And that's a brain explosion moment for so many people.
Yes. Yeah. You know what's one thing I like too is for some busy individuals that it's hard to dial in their work schedule because it changes, is I try to keep the training the same. So I might have a 5-day split for them, but I'll have each day to have a different shade in the sense of this hour and 15-minute workout. If we only have 45 minutes because that's how your life goes and you told me this ahead of time, like, Dave, there's going to be some times that just on a whim, my boss is going to ask me to stay late or I'm closing at the restaurant or whatever it is. I'll only have 45 minutes by the time I have to get home and put the kids to bed or whatever. I'm trying to give examples, but that's where I'll take that. Let's say we have 8 movements in there, for example, 8 movements on a day. I'll highlight priorities and then what's going to make up their 45-minute workout. So some people that we want that static 7-day repetitive workouts, we can still uphold that by altering a little bit. And it's not a crutch for them. It's a tool for them. This is how we stay on plan.
Yeah, and sometimes the way that I'll tend to do it is I'll give them, it'll be a low frequency per week anyway, so it'll be like a 3-day week or something like that. And then I'll be like, on the weeks where you're really crunched for time, split this into 2 workouts. Because a lot of times it's the total amount of time that it takes. It's not the days of availability that's the problem. So they can easily have half an hour today and half an hour tomorrow, but they just can't get the full one in today, and so they skip the whole thing. If you need to do that, just make this part of the plan. This is an optional 2-day workout if you need it to be. Just do that.
Yeah, that's a great way to approach it.
And then that way it gets them to do the entire workout over 2 days, when otherwise they would have done 0 of the workout.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the opposite of what I'm saying, but still, if you have the time, it's filling it all together one way or another. That works pretty well.
It's just like getting people out of that box and thinking it has to be exactly this way.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right, now that we've prefaced this, let's have fun and put together a quick little training program. Okay. Let me just see if I can put us.
So are we just doing the leg days?
Yeah, I don't want to do a whole plan for somebody, but let's talk about this guy let's just say it's going to be a 4-day split throughout the week. Okay. Maybe we can do another video and kind of show how training blocks come together and how many options you can put together a training block. But when we're talking about setting up an individual leg day, this is just be for fun, give people an idea of like how we can cover, again, this 25-year-old is doing 500 tests, 4 units of growth hormone. We finally got their diet in line. We're eating 5 solid meals where we're in a little bit of a surplus, but nothing wild. And recovery is going to be accounted for on the 4 days they're off. So what I want to do is just put a kind of a quad dominant with hamstring minor, just because I know you, like you just mentioned, you're cool with doing, it doesn't have to be just like a full on quad day. If I'm doing myself personally, I have 2 leg days and I prioritize 75-80% quads and then 20% hamstrings on my day 1, let's say on my quad day. And then hamstring day, I'm doing the exact same thing, but opposite. It's just 80%, 75% hamstrings, and I'm touching up on the quads because I have some room to recover before quad day 1 comes back around. So we'll keep things straight sets to a point unless you want to get fancy with it. But let's just start plugging in a week 1 quads with somebody. So we don't have to use all these spots. We can add more, take them out. But how do you like opening up a training day? And you're the expert here, so I'm going to let you take the steering wheel and I'll just navigate a little bit with you. So how do you want to set up a quad day for this kid that's lacking in the quad department? And this is our moneymaker. This is our big quad day. This is where we're getting the majority of the work for the week done.
Yeah, so I have a similar approach as you, as I won't have an 100% all quad day. Like it'll have some hamstring stuff in there as well. And
Sure.
primarily because I think there's a lot of ways that hamstring work contributes to your quad work and vice versa. So I think it really contributes to it, even if you don't care about the extra volume for it. And I almost always will program a hamstring curl variation before a squat pattern variation.
Oh, cool. So that's how you like your warm-ups, doing that?
Yes, I like a full working exercise of hamstrings, preferably something in the shortened range, so a standing single leg or a prone lying leg curl, just not the seated one. Maybe sometimes, it depends, but I would prefer like a shortened biased one of a hamstring curl to start off the
Okay.
session, or at least somewhere before our main compound quad movement, because it really warms up the knee as well. When you have that tissue on the back of the knees already pumped up, that
Yeah,
helps a lot with your squatting pattern once you get to it.
total.
So I would start off with some sort of a hamstring curl for sure.
Let's do prone lying ham curl.
Yeah.
So we'll
And
start out
then
with that. And
and
I'm very
then
much
with
the same, Tanya. Like I'll do, even though quad day, I'm warming up with a hamstring curl. It sounds just like a John Meadows routine. Hit those, and then I'll do little extensions, maybe 2 sets of each. And then my first quad movement, I still warm up within that movement pattern.
yeah, yeah.
Just to preface that with people.
Yeah. And if it's somebody who, depending on their training style and what I've seen, if it's somebody who tends to go really heavy and you have a hard time holding them back from doing that, and
Yeah.
maybe they have some knee issues or some loading issues or whatnot, I'll put leg extensions before their squat pattern too, so that they're as weak as possible when they get to their compound. But if I feel like they need to push it a little bit more in that compound and we really need to prioritize that as the main mass builder, then I'll put the leg extensions afterwards. So that kind of depends, but
Okay.
if we're assuming that we put that compound first and then the leg extensions after, because he's 25, so he probably doesn't have too many joint problems yet. I tend to be, unless I have a really specific intention with it, I tend to be vague with big compound movements. Like I'll tell them just squat pattern. Or
Okay.
if it's specifically quad bias, I'll be like quad bias squat pattern. And if they know what that means, they know what that means. If they don't, I'll tell them feet low, as much knee travel as possible. Just see what your options are, find one that feels good for you, get me some videos, and we'll go back and forth on whether or not that's a good movement.
Absolutely.
So
Well,
I'll usually do that. And
let's tell them
I'd
what they're gonna
recommend
do though.
something like a hack squat if they have it, but I'll just have them kind of look for what works best for them, and kind of we'll go back and forth on that from there.
Okay. Let's say his feedback, pendulum and hack are an option that he loves. And
Yeah, if hack works well, I always go hack if we're really trying to get quads.
you're speaking my language. Yeah, hack, squat.
I think pendulums are great, but I think they're more of an all-around leg builder for sure. If you really want to get the quads, hack squat all the way, especially if you
Yeah,
got a Cybex.
I love that thought.
Yeah.
All right. And then what we'll do after is we'll just get a starting volume of sets and the rep ranges of
Yeah,
how
I
we
always
want to.
I go through and pick my exercises first, and then I go through and do the sets and reps afterwards.
Same. We got the hack squat in place, and again, that's bread and butter
Yeah.
kind of scenario here with our quads, and we're
Yeah.
incorporating that. We're doing this again, a lot of knee flexion, and is our moneymaker for our quads. So quad bias. Where do you want to work from here?
From there, we
Maybe
could
something like
go.
that leg press.
I like to have something single leg.
Okay.
So I'd probably have them look for something that feels good, that they can push hard single leg with
Okay.
just a general leg emphasis, but not really high foot placement. So I wouldn't want it to be all glutes. So I'd want something they could get full range of motion on and get a lot of knee bend.
We could probably still say leg press if we set it up.
Yeah, yeah, like a single leg press, something that feels good. If they
Yeah.
get along really well with Bulgarian split squats, that's a really good functional movement,
Ooh,
especially if somebody can't do them well, that's usually a sign to me that they really need to do them.
yeah.
So I think that standing single leg stuff is really underrated, especially in the bodybuilding space, because that stuff is really important to get those hips and internal, external rotation and everything actually working correctly so that you can translate that over into machine movements. But it would be something either a Bulgarian split squat or a really good, if they get along really well with a leg press that's single leg. I would want something single leg in there as well.
I like the stand-in Bulgarian split squat.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Squat.
And there would definitely be lots of rounds of video feedback with that one, especially.
Yeah. Yeah. And perfect. I like that one there. So we got two pretty good money makers for quad bias specifically. That's a difficult movement where you really don't have to go wild with the weight. It's really going to be an execution thing, being on top of that quad. And then you're going to progress weight as you advance, becoming a better lifter over time, is the way
Yeah,
I
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
figure it. That's a great one. Where do you like going from there? Do we get another compound in here, or do we start
I
moving
kind of
into?
like to I kind of to put a mental break here of calf raises. Go do your calves before we move on to more brutal stuff.
That's a good one because you know what? They'll forget. They'll do them like shit at the end.
And if they have any sort of ankle mobility, which isn't really that much of a thing, it's other tissues, but ankle mobility issues that are stopping them from getting full range of motion in their compounds, I will have them do calf raises first before they do their squat pattern because that will improve their range of motion. But just assuming that's not an issue, I'd put it more in the middle as, like I said, a mental break.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. That's a pretty good setup, and that's useful because, like you just said,
And
now
honestly, I
now we're
wouldn't
getting
even
that
do
ankle
standing.
mobility movement.
I would really encourage them to find a good seated, preferably a horizontal seated, like one of the old lady pin loaded leg presses. Those are
Yeah.
fantastic for calf raises. I prefer for them to find a good leg press to do their calf raises on because I think they can really activate their calves a lot more and be a lot more stable if they're not axially loaded doing it.
I like that. That's a great, and I love being able to hit something secondarily that's going to set us up into the rest of our workout. So the ankle
Mhm.
mobility thought, it's a very
Yeah.
valid thought. That makes
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
ton. So we got our good warm up. We got our biased quad bias squat on the hack. Then we're going into Bulgarian split squats, which we're going to still approach on a heavier side as long as we can keep the form in line. We got this break setting up with seated leg press calf raises. Where do you like going from here?
Let's go to the leg extensions. We definitely need those.
I'll just move this. Not that we need more room, but I'll put it
Yeah.
in when we're done.
You
So
kind of used exactly the same colors I use in my spreadsheets, so that's funny.
yeah, yeah. Leg extensions, obviously quads. All right. I like that.
And
Now we're
that's
moving into kind of pumping more than expecting high intensity to be the driver. We can do a little bit, and then we also leave room for fun drop set options or
yeah.
Widowmaker options down the road if we want to get
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
fancy. Um,
And then from there, I would think about, okay, do they need some direct adductor work? Do they need some direct glute work? Especially if it's a guy. A lot of guys don't think they need direct glute work for some reason. Guys need glutes too, so maybe we would go from there on what they need. So if he needs any adductors, we'd hop on the adductor machine and do a couple of hard sets there. I really myo rep sets for adductors. It really pushes the intensity and keeps the
okay.
weight down because I know a lot of us can top out the stack on those.
And what do you do? Set up a goal, and then you're going to myo rep yourself
So
to
the
that
way I
goal.
approach it is I'll have the first activation set, which is usually pretty high rep, especially for something that tends to get really strong, like adductors. A 12 to 20, something brutal. Rest for 5 breaths, pump out as many as you can, maybe some partials, rest for 5 breaths again, and just repeat that for however many myo rep sets I want you to do.
Cool. We'll plug that in after when we get into that. Yeah, I'm going to pick
Yeah.
adductors because we're going to just say that we want to save his back and because we preface that maybe he's got a back that flares up once in a while. So instead of
Yeah.
getting
And that
into
would also be a consideration when we're talking about the whatever compound movement we're going to use. Does the hack squat bother your back? Because if it does, as good as it is, it's not going to do any good. So maybe we do the pendulum if it works better for their back.
no, that makes sense. And we could leave some of the glute work for that more dominant hamstring day when we're talking
Yeah.
posterior chain realistically. You want anything else for quads, or are we going to touch
No,
up?
I think that's pretty good. I like keeping leg days pretty simple because it does not need to,
Yeah.
it's not as many. People try to make it as complicated and as fleshed out as an upper body day, and you got to remember there's not as many muscles in the legs as the upper body. They're harder to train and you have to train them harder, but you don't need a ton of exercise selection. You just need a few good movements that work really well and you need to get really good at them. I think that
Yep.
a lot of variety in leg days does people no favors.
Yeah, I agree. And if I was having a great day on this hack squat, and the Bulgarian is something I felt like I could just drop and stick with it. Now, I'd have to get my client to prove to me they understand if they're actually benefiting themselves by doing this, but I might do it once in a while. I might say, this hack squat is fire today. My back feels great. I'm connecting mentally perfect. And I'm working right now in a progressed state. I'm beating numbers today. I might stick there and just drop this. And not that something we want to do because we want to build consistency, but I see what you're saying with that. We have a lot of variety where we can actually pull something out and just stick those 3 sets we might do or 2 sets we might do with Bulgarians and put them onto the hack squat or something like that. Just a thought. This is
Yeah.
probably top end of how much exercise selection I would do.
Yeah.
But this is pretty much dead on with a lot of my thought process. So we do want to touch up hamstrings, or at least get those some sets for working sets. So how do you want to get into that?
So that first one, the prone lying hamstring curl, that is a working exercise. So I wouldn't just approach that
Okay.
as a warm up. That would be a
No,
full working exercise. And depending on their needs, that might be the only hamstring volume I have them do that day.
we're going to preface it as 2 works.
Yeah.
So 2 work sets. So I'll let them warm up to their discretion.
Yeah.
Who am I to say I need another set of this or you don't? Just let them
Yeah,
figure it out. But we'll incorporate finishing off with getting to work and putting in 2
Mhm.
work sets, because the idea is also putting us in a little bit of a pre-exhausted state, right?
Yeah.
If we can. And that's wise to do, depending on what we have coming up. So we have spots for as much hamstring as you want to do or as little.
Yeah, if we feel like that we do need to add a little bit more hamstring there, if we do need to actively still keep growing his hams, maybe I'll just put in another hamstring curl, maybe something lengthened because we don't have anything lengthened there really, a seated hamstring curl.
Needed. Yep.
Yeah.
I like that. And I think that'd probably be enough if we, I think
Yeah.
that'd probably be enough right there. So let's do seated.
And I like doing lengthened bias stuff more towards the end of the workout anyway, because you're very warmed up, it's full of blood, so it's a little bit safer.
Yeah. Great point. And then we'll call that a day for this day when it comes to exercise selections. All right. That's a pretty good setup. I like that because now when we start talking about the initial week 1 working sets and reps, you've actually put yourself in a position where you can do a little bit of fancy work with keeping them kind of low amount of sets with the and going heavy if you wanted,
Yeah.
or you could add more volume and add an extra work set. So let's talk about that real quick. What's the theme going to be with this setup as we go? Let's just do week 1. We won't get into the rest, but
Yeah.
we're just assuming we're going to progress over time from maybe 2 work sets and finish at maximum 4 work sets at the end. And not everything can be that way. How do we want to set this up? So we want we'll just put in 2 work sets. And what
Yeah,
kind of
I would
rep
do.
do here?
So generally, again, that's going to depend on the psychology of the client. If I feel like they need to be held back from using too much weight sometimes, I might force them into some higher rep ranges and make it so that's not a problem. But in general, I'm going to give people 8 to 12-ish type of range on most things.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
I'd probably default to an 8 to 12, 10 to 12, 10 to 15, something like that for something like this. An 8 to 12, I think, is usually a safe bet.
Yeah. I like that because that's better than 8 to 10.
Yeah, and I always I tell people use double progression. So what I mean by that is start at a weight that you can get for 8 and then progress with reps until you can get the top of the rep range for all 3 of your sets. Recycle
Yes.
back down to the bottom and increase your weight. And that's kind of how I have them just auto regulate their progressions as they go.
So we're going to give a quick example of that because that's exactly what I do. So let's say the week 1, Tanya is able to do 100 pounds for 8 reps. Next week, she can do 100 pounds and she's going to stick with that selected weight intensity at 100. But her goal now is saying, I want to really drive for 8 or more, or more than 8. You want to hit 9. So she hits
Yeah.
9, and then let's just say by week 4, she's kicking ass. She hits 12 on both working sets at 100 pounds. That's when you're going to say, Tanya, and correct me if I'm wrong, but let's move up to 105 pounds or whatever, and just try to make, again, another challenge and progression to hit 8 reps. So that might just say, let's just say 110 pounds you go up to on this curl, and you're just squeaking in at 8 reps, clean reps.
Yeah.
That's kind of how you're like doing it. Okay.
Yeah, 100%. And I also will give them, depending on their experience, if they understand RPE and proximity to failure and what 2 reps shy of failure is, what real failure is, then I will give them an RPE prescription, and I'll tell them that applies to the last set. So I'll tell them last set RPE 8 to 9 or 10 or failure or whatever it is, so that they understand the first 2 sets or however many sets it is are not meant to go that far. They're meant to be almost there, and then the max intensity, whatever I'm giving you, is for that last set.
Gotcha. That's excellent. No, I really like that because I'd rather people drive through rep range than thinking load intensity first. So not just because I got to 10 reps, I can quickly jump up to 110 and get to 8. No, finish out your rep range. That would be the way to go in my mind. So finish getting all the way to 12, and then you can graduate to the next weight. Cool.
Yeah.
Now let's move into our big quad biased hack squat. We're assuming that his back's fine, got no issues. We got a green light. Where do we want to start week 1 here?
So I'm probably going to predominate the volume there. So 3, maybe even 4 sets.
Well, I like that. Let's do 3 because we're going to have some room to progress.
Yeah.
So let's go to 3. And then what are you thinking? Are you still getting in that 8 to 12, or is this something you want to get a little bit lower or a little bit higher? If you could just magically pick.
So what I like to do is actually do a higher rep one for the first set or the first 2 sets. So something like 10 to 15 or even 12 to 20, right? And then go heavier for the last couple of sets. So that way, there is no way you are not feeling the muscles that are working.
Okay. You want to do 8 to 10 or a 6 to 8 for that last set? What do you
For those
thinking?
last couple, sometimes I'll do a different one on all 3. We'll do 10 to 15, and then maybe we'll do 8 to 12, and then something like 6 to 8. Sometimes it'll be 10 to 15, and then I'll do last 2 sets 5 to 7, or last 2 sets 6 to 10. So something like that. We'll say last 2 sets 6 to 10.
Okay. So let's do this. Let's just make it last set. So we'll do 2 because we can change that as we go on. So let's just do the first 2 is going to be your first 2 of 3 last set. So I'll put the LS for last set. And I'm sorry, what did you say you wanted to do? 6 to 10 is our goal?
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, dope. I think that's
kind of like a reverse top set, back off set. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully people understand the logistics of why you're doing that. So the whole idea too is not only these are working sets regardless, right? Because you're still achieving failure, if not 1 rep from failure in this zone. And then you're challenging just that explosiveness at the end where you've put yourself in a little bit of a weaker position. So it probably, we swap these and said first set high intensity, and then the last ones, you might be lifting a little heavier on that first set. But I like the way that doing this on the tail end puts us in a safer spot, but there's no argument for it not being just as effective.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's move over to Bulgarian split squat, every person's favorite exercise on the planet.
Yeah, and taking into consideration that it is single leg, so it's a little bit more laborious. You got to take twice as much time doing it, and it's also right after the hack squat. These are going to be tough, so I would probably just do 2 sets on this.
Yeah, I like that. And then what are you thinking for rep ranges? I kind of like running these as high as I can on the individual.
It really depends, because I know a lot of people are going to have a really hard time keeping the intensity and keeping the mental fortitude at the 15th and 16th Bulgarian split squat.
Sure.
So I kind of try to be a little bit more moderate with it. I might just default to the 8 to 12 again with that and just see how that looks.
Yeah.
And depending on how they move, sometimes they do better with a higher rep. Sometimes they'll be like, okay, let's try to do this heavier. You can really push your intensity. Let's see what we can do with that. So it's going to depend on how they move, but I would default to an 8 to 12 to start and just see how that looks.
Yeah, that's great. And I like the large spectrum of the rep range. I don't like when people just plug in 10 or
Yeah,
they plug
because
in
people
15.
get, because the rep range doesn't fucking matter that much. It's just the zone of intensity or the zone of work that I'm trying to get you in, and like how I want you to work it. I've had to be the come to Jesus person for clients with this too, is just because it says 8 to 12 doesn't mean that you grind out a sloppy rep just to get to 8 when you only had 7, and it doesn't mean that you stop at 12 when you had 2 more to get to 14, because
Yes.
you've wasted that set if you do either of those things. I don't care if you fell within the rep range, you've wasted the set if you had more to give or if you gave too much. So if
Yeah.
you get to 7 and you have nothing left, you got 7, lower the weight next week. If you get to 12 and you have more left and you're supposed to go to RPE 9 or failure, you better keep going until you get to it and then just increase the weight next time, because then you have had a productive set and you haven't wasted the set.
Yeah. Yeah. No, these are things that seem simple to, it rolls off your tongue, but it's things that people just don't think through, Tanya. And
I've had
these are
people who have
just
been
as we're
I've had
coaching.
clients that have competed for years who they just made that realization.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not the rep range, it's the intensity that matters. Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I've tried to find what's intense for them. A quick little thing to mention would be just a thought process of when we put these together, what is intense for them? What's intense
That's what
for
those
me?
training videos are for.
Yeah. I'm loving the failure at 6 to 8, but what's really intense for me is not those. It's really taking that same movement and trying to say, Dave, go 12 to 15.
Oh my
That's
god,
where,
I will take a 6 to 8 over a 12 to 15 any fucking day.
right
I hate high rep sets.
now finding, but as long as they're equally effective, we
Mhm.
are going to work in the comfortable zone for this
Yeah.
individual. So I think
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that was just a quick thing to point out for sure. So let's see, bring this back up. Now let's finish off. We got our break in between here with calf raises, but we want to be effective. This isn't a true break. This is just a fatigue break.
If you're training your calves correctly, they're one of the most brutal exercises you can do. It's just not as demanding as doing it for your quads, so it counts as a mental break, but it's still very intense.
Sure, sure. So week one,
Um,
what do you want to set up? Are you one that likes doing in and out with the heels, or do you like just having them be neutral with
it's
their
just
footing?
neutral or however it feels most natural to them. I like to have them do it with no shoes if they possibly can, just in socks, because I feel like if you can get a better grip on that platform, you can be a lot more stable and actually use your calves better. And the big thing here is super slow eccentric, at least 3 seconds. So
Mhm.
you're going to pause in the hole for 2 seconds. You have to, no matter what, for calves.
Yep. So slow, eccentric, and then let's say, what do you want? Just 1 second rest pause.
I'm going to tell them 2 seconds because that's most likely going to end up being 1 second anyway.
Very good. Yes, I can tell you've
And
coached.
and it needs to be a full stop. You have to neutralize the potential energy in that Achilles tendon before that calf muscle is going to do anything.
Great. Correct. Yep. So it's three things. It's dropping down, it's stopping, and then committing to driving out of the hole,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
not
I
just a
kind of
true.
like to do myo reps on these as well, just to not have to do 3 grueling sets trying to get to the hard part of calf raises. So I'll do
Mm,
this kind of the same thing I was talking about with adductors. I'll do first set 12 to 20 to an RPE 10, like your last possible full rep. Rest for 5 breaths, and then do something like 3 myo rep sets after that of as many full reps as you can. And especially for calves, I'm going to tell you do partials until you barely move an inch from the bottom too.
okay. So let's set it up then as, let's just start with the 3, and then we'll do, so first mile rep set is what range you're thinking?
12 to 20.
All right.
And that way they have to progress all the way through that 20 before they put that weight up. So they have to be super disciplined with it.
And then
So
as we
rest.
continue on,
Yeah,
gonna
and then
do
I tell
12
them,
to 12 to 20 again, or you want to just
no, I
bring
just have
that?
them do the 1 and then rest 3 to 5 breaths, get your wits about you, and then do a myo rep set, do the same thing 3 times.
Perfect. All right.
And then you're done. So that should take a couple of minutes and you're done with those.
Perfect. All right, so that's an easy starting spot with that. And I agree with you. You got to hammer the hell out of calves. And I
That's why
see
most
people
people's
that,
calves suck.
yeah, and you know what's the problem? They load up the weight thinking that
And they
just
just
because I can
bounce.
do it, yeah, just because I can do it, you're bound. Yep, you said it perfect. They're bouncing. It's all Achilles. It's not squeezing. It's not pressing. They're not using their
Yeah.
foot as a lever in creating leverage to press through the pads
Yeah.
and
Like, listen,
contract.
I can use a lot of weight too. When I get on the leg press I was talking about that I use for my calf raises, I'm up at 230, 260, 270, depending on the rep range for my calves for high reps for a myo rep set. And that's slow and controlled and paused. Like,
Mm,
I would need more than the whole stack if I was doing it the way most people do it.
yeah. Yep. Absolutely. All right. Now we're going to move into leg extensions here. So where do you want to go with this? This pretty much, again, if I might just add, we really implied the intensity factors up top of really, again, the bread and butter of how we want to attack damaging the quads. I look at the leg extensions as very low damage that's going to be done, but the idea of building a fascia stretch, building the pump, and pushing nutrients into the target muscle, and then walking away with a pump to go home and recover because we just ate all day these nice nutrients that are in our blood. Now we're shuttling them to where they need to work. I like getting people to walk out with a pump. So with that thought process, how do we get the most out of these leg extensions? Because we're not going to tear muscle apart too much. We're going to be pretty much pumping and stretching the fascias, if that's the way you want to put it. So how do you want to approach this? So week one again.
So I would probably do straight sets for these just to get good solid work in on those.
Mhm.
And depending on what the final volume is going to be, which I'll explain once we get through the second day, I'm going to either 2 or 3 sets, but we'll just say 2 sets for now.
Okay. I like that.
And we'll probably go pretty moderately high rep. We'll say 10 to 15. And then on the second set, a drop set to failure.
I like that.
And it's going
Now,
to
how
be
do you explain the drop set to someone? This our example. They understand a drop set, but how do you want it done?
whatever makes sense as a drop for an increment. 1 or 2 increments, whatever makes sense. People can feel that out. It really doesn't matter that much to me. It's just I want you to drop down and get more reps and go to failure, basically.
Sure.
I want you to get more than a couple more reps, obviously, but I don't want you getting 20 reps because you drop down 4 increments. So
Yeah,
something that makes sense that'll get you a good amount of reps to failure. And I also like them to hold in the squeeze at the top of those leg extensions to make sure they're actually getting all the way up.
I like that. Yep. So the way I'll add my touch to this one. So where I would tell somebody this drop set, how we're going to approach this is going to be the top of this first rep range is going to be the minimum total reps I want to get. So let's just say your first leg extension set, we went to 14 at 100 pounds. Again, we'll just use 100 as the thought process. I'm going to hope that you can get 15 or 14 as a minimum within this drop set. So that might be 12 reps. And then they drop
Mhm.
down from the hundreds to, let's say, I don't know, 60, 70 pounds, somewhere in that. I don't know how much you like dropping them down, but I like trying to get at least a quarter of the weight off.
Yeah,
Um,
something like that.
and then I'll push them saying, now that you've gotten 12 reps, all you need is 3, and then just keep going until you're pumped out. Um,
Okay.
so I'll drop set 15 total minimum.
I like that.
Yeah.
Like,
So
it all
that
does
should,
the same thing. It's all the same way of getting to the same endpoint.
yeah. I like just giving a goal towards it, just so that way they have something that can be consistent. Because if I don't give them a goal, they're just going off a feel every time. And next time might be 12 reps. And it's what happened. Last week you were
Yeah.
able to pump. So let's give a number to encourage consistency. Now, abductors, let's get spicy with this one. Just let's throw in some sort of intensifier. And the
Yeah, I was just
reason
gonna go
is we're
myo
trying to
rep on
balance
that
the
too.
quads. Yeah, you like the myo rep? Yeah.
Yeah, because then I
What
would do exactly the same scheme as I did for the calf raises. Do that first 12 to 20, and then pump out 3 myo rep sets after that. Maybe 2. I don't know. It's a good amount of work on this day, so maybe just 2 with some partials at the end.
So 3 total sets, and then the last 2 we're gonna do the myo rep.
No, so one, just like with the calf raise, is just that 1 12 to 20, rest 5 breaths, do the myo rep set, rest 5 breaths, do the myo rep set. So it's just gonna be
Oh,
like a
okay.
straight like that. Yeah.
Gotcha. So it's one
Yeah,
overall.
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. One long set.
I see. Gotcha. Myo rep.
Some
And
people call them rest pause. I really don't think there's a difference.
yeah. And then we'll put it to the 12 to 20. Just being, I like trying to give some sort of intensifier so I can almost guarantee my work is being done on
Yeah,
these
yeah.
last movements. You know what I mean?
And so that with all that other volume, you don't feel like, oh, I have 3 full sets of this to do and then 3 full sets of this. It's like, oh, it's
Yeah.
just one straight quick and dirty thing, and then you technically still got 3 or 4 working sets in there because you approached failure 3 or 4 times. It's just super efficient
Yeah.
and
I-
load limiting, which is positive.
yeah. I'm someone that might actually marathon set that with them. Again, they're all the same, right? You're right.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter. It's going to be a
It's just
preference.
variations of the same concept.
Yeah, I like that challenge of taking the same weight and that I would probably fail at 14 and allowing them to marathon it out to 20. So
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
they have to just cluster it wisely in the sense of where do I stop? Do I just do 8, catch my breath, pump out another 4, then keep going until I hit this
Yeah.
marathon goal?
Yeah, and then once you kinda get to know your own body, it's like, I know that, like, I have a number that I'm aiming for in my head when I'm doing my myo reps or my partials because I know generally what I should be able to do. Okay, if this is a 12 to 20 set on this, I should be able to get half that many again for my myo rep set, and I should be able to get if it's say I got 5 or 6 myo reps, I should be able to get that many partials after that. So, like, you
Sure.
get to know what your performance is and you know what you should be aiming for each time, so you know you're not just cheating yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and I like making that. I'm glad you said that because I like making forms of consistency. So that's just one way of doing it. Having a goal, even if it's mental, is just a great way to make sure that I have something to strive for on these
Mhm.
movements. Now we want to finish up with hamstrings, so we split a little of the work.
Yeah,
What's your
and
thoughts
I would
over here?
honestly I'd probably make that pretty quick and dirty too. I might do a myo rep on that as well,
I like it. I like it. I'm gonna
because
actually
then that
switch it.
way and with partials too, because that really just digs into that lengthened aspect and really bleeds it dry.
I'm gonna get filthy with how's that?
Hell yeah.
I'm gonna do actually one set with a marathon to 20. You're probably gonna think this is stupid. Marathon to 20, and then 4 minimal partials.
Yeah.
Just for fun. See what you're made of sometimes.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, it's maybe this leaves us room to actually do this tactic and not be afraid to move the sets up as we go along.
yeah.
So that's one thought process. But this is a great setup. So this is something that I think you did a fantastic job with just us on the fly putting together some structure that's not overwork. I don't think that if anyone looks at this, they're going to say this is way too much because we're leaving room on the sets and we're also leaving the ability to drop out intensifiers down the road if we want to just get heavier, stronger straight sets as we get towards week 5. We can do that. There's no rules to how we approach it. So I like that. Let's see. So nonetheless, hopefully that gives people a little rough idea of how they can approach as a new coach, developing programs to people that get you off to a good start. And I know I sound like a repeating record on everything when it comes to my thought processes, whether it's diet, the gear, the training, the recovery, but having some things that are foundational pieces that we just put together, like thought processes on training. So if you're a coach, you need to build the attitude that there's no cookie cutter bullshit. We don't do that. If you want to be a good coach, you have to do the homework of these first 5 steps we talked about. And that's going to make this last part of putting together a training program almost a breeze for a starting point.
Yeah.
You're going to have an understanding of what I can and can't do with these people. So it narrows down where we're going to start our work from. And then that's
Yeah,
where you
because
can
it's
get
like
on.
the reason that we can just kind of on the fly create stuff like this is because it's just all a variation of the same template in our brain because we understand the concepts and what needs to apply. And it's just a matter of mixing and matching those pieces to fit with that person's puzzle each time. So
Yeah.
it's like we're not going in and creating an idea from scratch every time. We have the same setup in our head every time that makes sense, and then we just move things around to make sense for that person. And just to close a loop on the thought that I mentioned before about how I add up the sets at the end and everything is that if we were to go through that second leg day and the full program and everything, then my process once I get to the end of that, because the last thing I do is I fill in the total sets and the rep ranges and intensifiers like we just did. Then I go to the bottom and I put a list of all the main body parts, and that'll depend depending on the person's goal. So this is a physique athlete who wants to be a bodybuilder, so it would be more detailed. It would be broken down into different heads of muscles, like front, side, rear delt, stuff like that. Whereas with a general population person, I might just put shoulders, right?
Yeah, I get
But
you.
for this person, I would have it more in detail and it would be split up by body part, and I would add up, manually go through and add up the sets that I have assigned that to double check myself. And
Yeah,
there's never been a time that I did not do that in the end and see, okay, this is way fucking unbalanced compared to what I wanted it to be, and I have to go through and change the set numbers.
yeah,
And then I get it into the balance that I want it to be. And I think that's a step that I hear almost nobody ever talk about in coaching, and I don't see trainers do it very often. And that's what I'll do with somebody's program if they come to me with one, is I'll do that initial thing, and that's how I find out you have 40 sets of arms and 7 sets of hamstrings. What's happening? And so I'll end up with that sometimes at the end of mine, where I have way too much volume over here and not as much volume as I wanted for this. Whereas intuitively, when I was going through it just day by day, like most people do, that's as far as they think. And they think, oh, this looks good day to day, and they go with that. But they're missing that step of going to the end and summing up the totals for the whole entire week and seeing how that relationship is. Because if you want to do a quad bias program, that means that this guy's quads needs to be the highest volume when you get to those totals at
yes,
the end. And then it needs to titrate down from there, a good amount for hams and glutes. And then if we're deprioritizing upper body, those should probably all land in probably the single digits per week if we're really hammering the legs. So
yeah,
it needs to look like that at the end. So I do that, and I leave that at the bottom of their training program all the time. And I even put a note for some people. I'll be like, this is more for me than you. Don't worry about this. And
sure,
I just
sure,
leave it down there so that anytime I go in and make changes, I remember to go down and make changes to my set volume and the totals so that I know it's always in the balance that I want it to be. So that's just
sure.
the final part of my little program building process.
Yeah, if we're gonna have a second leg day, that's gonna have the opposite, a touch up of quads. So
Yeah.
you're gonna total working sets for this day, then you're gonna go down to day 4, whatever, the other leg day, total that up, and you're gonna get a weekly total,
Yeah.
plugged in
And I make sure
throughout
that
there.
looks right, and then I go back and fix inevitably what I need to fix to make my ratio correct, because it's always off. That's why it's so important to do that, is it's always skewed from what I actually intended it to be, and I have to go through and make some different changes. And it always ends up looking really unconventional, and it's, oh no, this makes sense because look at the set totals down here.
Yeah, I like that. So we got 9 here as an example.
And I do, for the record, I do count the MyoRep sets as individual sets because I consider
Oh,
each of those rest pause sets is a new set and a new. Anytime that you're doing an intensifier where you're having multiple approaches to failure or whatever the intensity is, I consider
it's
that its own set because that's another approach to failure. So
straight straight up.
if it's the MyoRep set with it's just one set, but you're approaching failure 4 times, you've done 4 sets.
And then
So that's how I count them.
one thing I'll quickly chop in here is to get my clients to do, so this lying ham curl, I want them to track it. So we'll just say 12 reps on the first set for the 100 pounds. And then now that I'm asking for 2 sets, so they might have just gone to, let's make it simple, 10 reps on the second one, still at 100 pounds. So that way I can look as weeks progress, if we're
Yeah.
going up in numbers, if we're sliding back for some reason or another. All those things are going to come into play down the road. And this is just starting. This is just the
Mhm.
starting point. We
Yeah.
can get
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
more fancy, much more specialized, even
Yeah.
into the way that we plug out the whole week. Give you a quick example so we don't drag this video any longer, but something like looking at this person's got, let's say, 5 days to train. You could do push, pull, leg, push, pull, if that's how you needed to structure frequency for these body parts that we've evaluated weaknesses with. And then there's millions of other ways. So there's,
Yeah.
push, pull, leg, upper, and then weakness for day 5.
Yeah.
You could do stuff like that. Or someone like 5 days, we might do lower body for the wellness girl, push, attack the thing. Same thing, looking at weaknesses, because we're still going to make do with that one push day, lower or quad dominant or glute dominant, whatever, and then pull. And then we could put in day 5 the hamstring dominant or posterior chain with hamstrings or lower back with hamstrings. Forget the glutes.
Mhm.
It depends on evaluating your client.
Yeah.
I like this. So I hope that's helpful to people. Last quick thing to hit on though, what's the biggest mistake though you see with what we put together in this right here? I like everything that I have when it comes to tracking. So tracking weight, tracking sets, tracking time over there. Is there something I'm missing that you like to do with tracking people's training protocols?
Just what
Like, are
I
you
already
gonna kind
mentioned.
of rate things, like kind of rate like today was a 10 out of 10 training or
No, I don't get super granular with the rate every day and the like how did each set. I just incorporate that into tell me about everything in your check-ins. I have a lot of open-ended questions in the check-ins, and that's their opportunity to expound upon stuff like that. And then in
yeah.
the spreadsheet, because it's two components, I have the data tracking sheet with all their data and everything, and then I have a set of check-in questions that they answer.
Mhm.
And in the spreadsheet, I actually just this year started recently using this, and it's an idea I got from, you know who Sam Miller is? He does the metabolism school.
Yep,
Okay,
yep.
so he has this shreds rating system, and I just adopted that and started using that, and it's SHEDS, hunger, recovery, energy, digestion, and stress,
Okay.
and it's just a 5-point rating system for all of them. And I just have them, I have it so at the end of each week they have a drop down to rate them. And I have a
Yeah,
little definition of what 1 and 5 means, and 5 is best for all of them just to make it easy. And so that way I can look at trends of how they're like, what their feedback is and what their subjective feedback and how they're feeling, and correlate that with the data. And then that kind of corresponds with the questions where they can kind of talk more a little bit about it. From
yeah,
there, if there's problems that show up there, then we can kind of dig into the individual reasons. Like if it's energy and training, like I have questions in there about like how your training performance is, how your pumps are feeling in the gym, what specific exercises do you feel you connected really well with, what did you not connect well with, why do you think that might be? So just open-ended probing questions. So if there's problems and they communicate well and honestly, it should show up in the check-ins, and then that's
yeah,
where I can go back and kind of dig into individual things from there. So it's really
yeah,
the onus is on them to be good communicators and come through with things and with the information that I ask of them. Otherwise, it's like I really can't provide any service for you. Because
yeah,
me just looking at your training logs in your spreadsheet doesn't tell me much other than I've given you a training program and you're doing it.
yeah. On one of my videos or Q&A, or I think one that I did by myself, it was asking me what's the biggest pet peeve of check-ins? How can people do better check-ins? And it was exactly that. It was communicating, and I meant specifically in when someone says to you like, "Hey, my training was awesome." And that's all they say. What does that mean? Does that mean
Yeah.
that you awesome to you is, "Hey, this was the first week I made it to the gym every day?" Or does
Hmm.
that mean I PR'd all my heavy compounds? I felt really good at the end of the day. I felt like I wasn't as beat up as I was actually stimulated and trained. So little things are good communicating when you can take those data points, put them together, and then hear their actual discussion of elaborating on what that
Yeah.
means.
Yeah.
Like when someone says my training sucked, it's, well, keep going.
Hmm.
What sucked about it? What, just tell me what, and maybe it's something where I just gotta say, shake yourself off and try again next week. It might be as simple as that. It might be, okay, I think we have some things we need to talk about and work on because something's not structured for you the way it could work best. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you mentioned that because I see that as following up on training doesn't have to be a chore every week. It just has to be monitoring. It just has to be overlooked. And if someone's doing well, step the fuck away, leave them be. But great stuff. Great stuff. Tanya, I appreciate it as always. You are a very in-depth bucket of knowledge for me that I like to pick at. And that's what I like about this little fun group we have between yourself and me and Mike and everybody that we put on the Coach's Corner and Pulse channel as well. We just have a way where everyone's got a little specialty that I appreciate hearing their insight for. When I thought about putting this video on training together, I knew that immediately I wanted to talk to you about it and just get your thoughts on how we can kind of show people how we show them behind the door a little bit of like how we go about it. So this is going to
Hmm.
help the person setting up their own training, but hopefully you coaches out there that are new to this is what's fun for everybody. And this is also the danger point other than gear and diet that you put people in. So make sure that this isn't a second thought. Don't be like, hey, I'm really good at diet and gear and training's not my specialty. Start learning and start listening to things like this. The old John Meadows is someone that I've always really looked up to. Even Justin Harris, who we all think of diet really a lot with, he's got some great training, like the old, what was his, what was it, Project Super Heavyweight, all of those
Hmm.
videos with him and Akuklo. teaching the power building aspects of things. I took a lot from that, even though it's not my main style.
Yeah. I
Someone
used to
like
train like that
yourself,
for years, yeah.
someone like yourself, I appreciate it because you're very well versed. It's not like you're just very specialized in one part of training. And I think what makes you probably successful with people is you're able to branch different training programs and not tell everyone they have to live under my roof. They have to do what I
Yeah.
do. It
Yeah.
just doesn't work in the long run, right?
Yeah, and that's really gratifying to hear that I'm thought of immediately for that, because I do wanna build a reputation as being somebody who's a hypertrophy mechanic, who's really good with that
Yeah.
stuff, because I am, and I know that I'm really good at that particular skill, and I do good work with people, and I really would like to build that up as being known for that and doing that work with people.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to put Tanya's information in the description below, of course. Do you want to give them a quick little heads up on your talking about muscle mechanics? Tanya's got a new service that she's putting out for people for a monthly service. You want to give them a little heads up about that, please?
Yeah, so I do have my main regular full coaching service, so you can get month-to-month coaching, and there's different tiers of that depending on how into the weeds and how serious you want to take it. But I'm also offering a very low ticket offer. It's $50 a month where you can send me your training footage. I'm not going to program for you, but you can send me what you're already doing via WhatsApp, just like my clients do, and I will give you a technical breakdown and give you feedback and clean up your form and your execution and get you training a little bit better. That's
Yeah,
some of the best work that I do with my clients. The clients who send the most training videos get the best progress, and so I figured I'd offer it as a standalone service for people who don't want to or aren't ready to commit to full coaching and just want to keep
yeah,
doing their own thing, but want to do their own thing better. Because I found that I've enjoyed doing that for people in the gym. I've done that before with people who have a coach already, but they come to the gym in person to train with me to improve their training of that programming that they already have. And
yep.
that's totally cool with me because I don't care what the program is, we can make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully anyone out there to hit her up on that, really think about it, right? It's not just making your training better, but if you have something that you're always tweaking your knee, or you're always tweaking your lower back, or something just
Yeah.
isn't connecting and you feel you've got it dead on, you've audited your own training, let her take a peek at it. And protecting yourself from injury and wear and tear down the road is something that's huge too. It's not just improving the training, it's being able to be
Mhm.
set up to do this for extended periods of time. So
And
I
that's
love
gonna
that
improve
you're
your
doing
training
that.
anyway. It's like a lot of people, especially guys, will they'll get into a middle age or so and they'll have all these injuries and they'll be like, "Yeah, I had to start training right. I had to start lightening it up and controlling the form." It's if you knew that already and you had done that before, you would have been a lot better off now. Like, why don't you just start doing it the way you know you're supposed to be doing it?
1000%.
But
1000%.
yeah, and even if people already have a coach, there's a lot of coaches who don't specialize that much in training and who don't ask for
Oh,
training
yeah.
videos and don't give feedback like that. If you've already got a coach that you're happy with everything else, but they just don't really specialize in training technique or getting into that and you want to fix up your form, I'd be happy to be that part of the team and just do that.
Yep. Yep. Great add on to what you already got going.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
would be something, if I wasn't confident in my own training, I'd be just adding that and using that as another source on the side for making myself better for sure.
Yeah.
No different than hiring a meal prep company to cook for you, having someone to audit things for you at your disposal is just makes
Mhm.
a lot of sense. That's awesome. But
It's
hit
literally
her
the
up.
only way to actually have a shortcut. That's the only shortcut is guidance.
Yeah. Well said. So everybody check out Tanya's socials down below. Reach out to her, DM to her Instagram as well. I'll have all that information down below. And yeah, thanks again, everybody, for watching. You know the drill. And subscribe and throw us some comments down below about your training or your thoughts. And until the next one, everybody be good and grip it and rip it.
No bad reps.